Mara Betti is a successful architect in her early 50s who works for one of the leading architectural firms in Boston. She's also a trans woman and biological father of two sons, ages 18 and 22. In this deeply personal interview with PFLAG Cape Cod's Rick Koonce, Mara talks emotionally about coming out and accepting herself as trans, a journey that has taken her decades and which has put tremendous strain on her heterosexual marriage to her wife, whom she met in college and still describes as, quote, my best friend. Mara talks about the dark times she's lived through and the steps she's now taking, with the help of a therapist, to build a new identity and to navigate a personal and social world she never imagined she'd be encountering at this stage of her life. And finally, Mara talks lovingly about her relationships with her two boys, with whom she wants to remain close, though she understands that this will take time, patience, and love on everyone's parts, especially as her boys focus on discovering their own identities as young adults. As this intimate interview reveals, Mara, like other transgender people struggling to be themselves, displays tremendous resolve and resilience, qualities that indeed make her a compelling profile in LGBTQ+ courage. Mara Betti, welcome to Profiles in LGBTQ+ Courage. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you for having me.
Mara, you and I met at a recent panel discussion that focused on the life stories of people who are transgender. Your own story in this respect, I find so unique. You identify as a trans woman. That said, you married a woman at a relatively early age. You have two sons, 18 and 22, and still have connections with your wife, whom you describe as your best friend. Because there's a lot here that we can unpack, let's kind of start with this question, if we can. We're doing this recording just after a big Pride event in June of this year, and you've told me that Pride brings up a lot of conflicting feelings for you. Can you talk a little bit about that?
On one level, I'm almost truly overwhelmed by the amount of support and venues. But, honestly, I'm trying to figure out my place with my advocacy at work and my advocacy around trans issues. And I don't always align myself with everyone and everything in Pride. I definitely support all my community, but sometimes I just kind of struggle to see where I fit into that sometimes.
If you would, talk a little bit more about that. What are the challenges in terms of finding your place, your purpose, and your connection?
I've known that I was trans from an early age, and starting college and meeting someone that I could share that with, that didn't think I was a weirdo and just thought, accepted me for who I was, and then built the life around our friendship.
This was your wife, correct?
This is my wife, Tina. Yeah. And we always talked openly about it. We both didn't really know what it would be. But the hard part is that we had a really strong friendship throughout our entire relationship and marriage and post-separation, even though it has its challenges and even though there's some really difficult things that we have to do still. I still kind of love being part of a family. I love being other to a partner, and I love taking care of my kids and built the life around it. And I valued myself based on people looking at us and saying, wow, what a great dad or what a great family. And, they're so strong. And now without that, it's not that they're not there, but there's time and distance and things that happen. And it seems it's hard for me to value myself without that component. And I try to value myself based on work and other advocacy, but it doesn't really come close to how I judge myself and my family and being there for my family. And I put myself in about Pride. I put myself in different scenarios, and I try different venues. I try different group activities. I try different fundraisers, or just trying to be out there to experience all the different things in our community, because I feel like I have to understand it more and figure out what, and sometimes it just doesn't, it's just not what I'm looking for. I could just sit around on a couch and watch TV and talk about the barbecue we had yesterday. I can do that all day long.
So is it fair to say, now you came out in 2020, is that correct? Formally?
Yeah, I socially transitioned in 2020. I started hormones 5 years prior than that. I do know quite a few people that when I came out, and those are the people that when I came out in 2020 that I thought, would probably like your college friends or high school friends, I thought would be my life for a long time. And a lot of them were going through the same thing I was going through. A lot of them happened to be my age because we found each other through support groups that basically were there for folks in our situation. And I always there was a time when I thought that my love and relationship with my wife was forever and we were just going to be stronger than anything. And I didn't quite identify with everything that those other folks were going through. But ironically, looking back on it, I'm saying I'm feeling a lot of things that I think that they talked about. And it's just, like I said, I thought that things were going to be different. And I know that we need to be apart, but there's a lot of other complicated things just in marriage alone that makes it tough. And then you add the transition piece of it, which is hard both on my soon-to-be ex-wife and my youngest especially.
Yeah. To the extent that you're comfortable with it, please, can you talk a little bit about the status of affairs right now with your two sons and with your soon-to-be ex-wife?
My wife and I have been separated for 3 years. I moved out of our family home of 20 years and we sold 2 homes before we got divorced just to, I think, make the landing easier for both of us. And we always promised each other that we would do divorce differently. And we try to do that every day. We're as amicable as we can be. We send random messages letting each other know we're still thinking of each other sometimes. And even when it's hard, and even though we know that's going to bring up emotions for the other one that could throw your whole day off. But right now, I'm trying to look at it from her point of view, and I'm trying to be strong so that I can continue to provide and I can be in their life in some capacity. This strange part of me thinks I could fix things. And I know that that's not true, but that doesn't really stop me from thinking that way. My oldest just graduated from grad school, and he and his friends actually were some of the first people that I came out to. And likewise, their parents, because they all seemingly raised their kids the way we did. And the kids were all open to me when they would visit and conversations that my oldest would have with his friends. So it seemed like a safe place to start. This is even prior to coming out socially and formally. My youngest, on the other hand, he was about 3 years ago. So, 15 years old and going into from junior high to high school to parents separating to selling, 2 homes that, he'd known his entire life, to his brother going off to college, and my transition on top of that, not to mention the issues that he and I have, I think, in my view, stem from transitioning late in life and not really dealing with it earlier and having a lot of anger around that issue, having a lot of angst and some pent up emotion about, hanging on as long as I could, knowing that maybe our marriage wouldn't look the same. And that ended up being true. But, in the meantime, my youngest, he just got full force that entire storm, and it
Rejecting you?
Not at first, but recently.
Hmm.
Recently, maybe 8 weeks or so, not really communicating it. And I do parent through my wife, even though he doesn't always know. I don't have the ability to affect him like I would if I was in the house, and that really is something I struggle with because I'm not used to, since transition, I'm not used to running away from anything. I don't hide from anything. I did that my entire life, and it's not who I was. It was just something I felt like I couldn't share. And now I run at my problems most of the time, but this one's really hard because I have zero ability to affect him. And I just want to let him know that I'm still there for him. So I try lots of different ways, and I'm just trying to be patient and trying to be around for, hopefully when, if he does change his mind or if he does need me, that hopefully I'm there. But it's it's easier for him right now to not have to deal with me as well. And I don't know that he has a hard time from his friends. I don't know that that's what it is, but he's, dealing with it the best way he knows how, I guess.
Mara, as we talk, it's so clear to me that you are a loving parent, and you've talked about missing the picket fences. And if I may ask, what is it you most miss about your past life as your kid's dad? What do you most miss, and what do you hope will be able to be again in the future at some point?
We are very strong, and we are very close. And when I started to practice on my own business 13 years ago now, and I built that was a family choice that we made so that I could help get my kids to sports and do the things that I need to do. And my wife would have, her career goals, and that worked for us. And I was very close, and I loved being that part of the household. And it just brought me a lot of joy to be around them. They're both really sweet boys, like the kind of boys that you want your little girl to meet. You know what I mean? Like they're very sweet boys. They're very compassionate. And even my youngest, just, despite the issues that we have, he's full of heart and values, very strong values, especially when it comes to both of them standing up for folks that are strong enough to fight for themselves. They're both very strong that way, which is one of the reasons why the issues I'm having right now are really hard, because I feel like, other complicating issues aside, my youngest would be supportive. I think he is supportive. He told me to do me, before I decided to come out socially, and I talked to them about it different times separately. And he told me, you got to do you. That doesn't mean that he always agrees, or it doesn't mean that he would always support me, but it meant, and it's what set me off more intentionally with my transition. But he said, you have to do you, and that's all that really matters. And I took that as a blessing, and I just never thought that I wouldn't be around to do all the things that I did throughout prior to transition. I just didn't think that those things would necessarily drop off. And it's complicated because they're both of the age where, my oldest went off to college and kind of leaving the nest, and my youngest, getting his license and being more independent. And they're teenagers and young men, and they have their own life anyways. And I wasn't looking to throw things off for them. I just got to a point in my life where I couldn't hide. I was presenting female at different times privately, and found myself prior to 2020, changing 2 or 3 times a day just to be able to experience life authentically, even though it was alone or with my wife, or around my home, or if there was an event or something. But it wasn't about dressing for me. It just wasn't. That was something that was like a Band-Aid, maybe is the best way to it was like just something that it soothed me and centered me a little bit, but it was never lasting kind of warmth in my heart. It was just kind of something that I did, and then something would come up and I'd have to change back, and that got really, really hard. And I tried to I talked to my boys at different levels because of different ages, and they have different experiences with their friend groups, and in one way or another, they both supported me, and as did my wife. And I didn't transition as long as I did because I didn't want to lose her, and she never really stopped me from pursuing either therapy or social groups, or presenting at home, or taking steps to medically transition when I was 45. She supported me in all that. And so we were both kind of not saying the hard thing, which was our love may not always look the same, but that I think is harder for me because I still look at her the same. It's funny because this is something maybe a lot of people don't talk about, but we both date, and I date trans women and I date men, and I haven't dated genetic women because some things do kind of change with hormones, and some things I've been know of me that I've been interested in, but I still look at my wife the same way, ironically. I just doesn't change. And so I try to give her what she needs in terms of what our relationship must become, and in more, obviously it's platonic, and obviously co-parenting, and obviously, friends when we need it. And it's hard. It's really hard to do.
Thank you for sharing all of that. It's so personal, and I'm struck by a couple of things. One of which is, I think it sounds like you want to be known by these people that you love and who love you. And right now, that's a challenge. I mean, the boys are kind of discovering themselves, aren't they? Their own identities.
Of course.
And I'm wondering, do you ever wonder if maybe at some point they will come back around and they will, having sort of situated themselves with their identities, be able to be more open to who you are now?
Yeah, and to be really clear, even with my oldest, if we have long periods of not communicating, I feel that we're so strong that what we've taught them as parents doesn't go away. And I think they would be there for family in a heartbeat. I like to think that.
Yeah.
I know that both my boys would, even if it's hard. I just want to say, one of the things that I've always felt about our family is we were always good together, and we didn't need a lot. And we would look at folks who are looking for material things, and their friend, they weren't getting necessarily the same things as their friend. We worked hard, and we had 2 homes, and we would always give them that perspective. Like, you're not exactly wanting for much here. You have a second vacation home in New Hampshire. So, we would always be conscious of where we were and be grateful. And I think that they both, and my wife and I, we lived our life that way, and we didn't need a lot as long as we had each other. But in fairness, I think my oldest and I always had a really strong relationship, because he's a very good communicator, and that works for me. And my youngest and I struggle, I think, because sometimes we have very similar personalities, very strong personalities. And I just want for him to understand why so much, but sometimes that doesn't really matter. And I just want to bring us back together and be in his life, so he knows I'm there if he needs me.
I think some people might hear this story and wonder, well, if it was all of that, what prompted this other dynamic to come into play? And I think it's the part of somebody being transgender that the outer world or the larger world doesn't understand. Can you talk a little bit about the challenges and struggles you had, even within a family system that was very loving and self-sufficient?
I won't say that we had everything that we wanted, and our relationship was pretty normal on many levels, but I would say above average based on our friendship, because we were friends first. And that's what we were all during our friendship, and all during our marriage, and all during our separation. Even I hear it when we have really tough conversations, when there's things that I'm sure my wife just wants to say because her perspective, and she needs to get it out, and talking about money and complicated things. And I think we've both held back out of respect. And that's what our relationship was the entire time, because I was honest from a very early point in our relationship, and our relationship was based on mutual respect and honesty from day one. So we were always doing things, exploring my being transgender, even in college when we were together, taking trips to explore together, not out in public, but in a hotel room, or going shopping together. And I still have clip-on earrings from college days that we had. They were yin yang earrings, and I still have those. And those are my earliest memories of sharing being trans with someone. And I have photos going back to those college days of me presenting female. And it's 30 plus years of photos of me being trans and presenting female. But my wife took every single one of those photos. That's the thing. And ironically, there was a short time after college, there was a photo that we took together. We put it on auto timer, and she jumped in the photo. And looking back at that photo now, I sometimes wonder, because I look in her eyes and there was things that she didn't seem happy about. But knowing what she would I guess the space that she'd give me to explore just made me love her more and not need to look for anything else, even though I knew I had this thing, which for many, many years, despite reading every book I could in the library in college, like I knew what was going on, but I think I was reading for cures. I was looking to God to fix me. I was looking for drugs to make it, medication for depression and things like that. I was looking to anything to make it go away first. Like I would do anything to not have been what I would say afflicted with it. And I hate that word, but that's sometimes what it feels like, because I don't feel like there's a choice, and I've done everything in my power to fight it because of my sort of spiritual upbringing and my faith. And so I wasn't looking to expedite transition because I had all these other things around me that I filled my life, even though in the background I was always thinking that there's more to me. And my wife knew it. And she's been questioned many times by her friends, and she's told her friends those same things that make me who I am, include being trans, include that side of me, that it's part of who I am, and that is part of the person she fell in love with. I just really didn't envision a time when having to express myself full time would lead to all that else, everything else that I had in my life that was important to me, especially after it took so much strength and risk, if you will, knowing coming out would be hard on everyone. And to get there and have that prophecy come true, like I'm part of a statistic now, trans people whose partners need to move on. And the hard part that nobody understands is that we never stop. I'm speaking for myself, and I believe I'm speaking for my wife, but the hard part is we never stop loving each other. So, people can get divorced for so many reasons, far less impactful reasons. We fought this sort of every step of the way until having to present myself authentically full time became so consuming, because I had started hormones to understand if physical changes to my body were going to drive me away from transition or convince me to go forward. Because one thing I always read, if you're not trans and you start having changes to your body, you're going to run in the other direction. But that doesn't usually happen. There's so many other things that I had angst about and dysphoria about that started to drop away with medication, with hormones, that I wanted more. And I had my own business, and I was afraid of losing all my clients if I transitioned. But pressure to support family and having anxiety about not being out, but having been on hormones for a long time, over 5 years, things got really complicated for me. Things got to the point where I became really angry because I wasn't doing summertime things with my family because I was afraid I couldn't show my chest. So I'd wear layers of clothes because I wasn't out yet. But if I went home, I'd put a t-shirt on, I'd take my low ponytail and make it a high ponytail or something like that. And nobody at home really, it was comfortable. It was safe. And I look forward to coming home just to be able to let my hair down, so to speak. But the need to present more and more was probably driving me away from home into my bricks and mortar office that I had down the street, because after hours I would present there and do my work. That's how I was able to get through a lot of my work, because otherwise I was just sitting there with anxiety, not functioning. But if I presented female, and ironically, it's the same thing that helped me study for my architecture registration exam. Like I had to study for each section, and literally the things that stuck in my brain because I studied them while presenting female. The other things just draw, and it took me a long time to finish the 9 sections because I had to find time to study where I could present after the kids went to bed, say. And it was really, really hard, but I have memories of things that I was doing when I was presenting when I was really little, like if I borrowed someone's clothes or, snuck off somewhere and, borrowed my grandmother's square dancing outfit or something. I have memories of those things, but not a lot of memories of my childhood in general. So I know there's something to when I'm being authentic, that there's allowing information to come in and be stored. And I love that. But anyways, I just got to a point where, pressure was building up.
Yes.
And if I'm being very honest, I didn't, and I don't know if this is where you sort of give trigger warnings or whatever, but I like to tell people I came out the hard way. I hit a wall and I didn't know how to take control of my life. And my rock, my wife, who took care of everything, couldn't anymore. She just told me one day that she wasn't enough for me. And she was saying, no matter what we have, that her alone wouldn't be enough to fix all our problems. And I just needed to, we needed to move on because she couldn't be all the things I needed. So that was, I ended up in the hospital after attempting to hurt myself. And I was unconscious for 4 days in the emergency room, and basically in and out, and just members looking at me and seeing me in that state and realizing that the issues that I have to wrestle with are just so much bigger than us propping each other up every day and elevating each other. And because we were starting to do things to resent each other because of the anger and things that we weren't addressing. So that's where I ended up getting support. And I didn't go to the hospital, come out, but a few months later, that was the end result of it. And that's how it started. It wasn't like I screamed to the world, I'm out, here I am. I sort of broke.
So, Mara, again, thank you for sharing that. And have you been able to find solace or support through therapy or through friendships, support groups?
Yeah. I mean, as a side note, one of the first things that I did on my first day of college, besides meeting my wife, because we went around, the group of people that I met that day, we went around and knocked on every door on campus and invited people back to our room for a party. And she was someone that came back, and I've known her since our very first day of college. The other thing I did was I went to school psychologist. I started trying to ask questions about all these things that were going on in my head. So I've been in therapy for a long time. Again, sometimes to beat this, sometimes to embrace it. But yeah, I have a wonderful therapist now, the one who basically made the decision for me to go to the hospital, and I credit her with saving my life. And I have varying support groups that I sometimes, that what I need, and sometimes I'm there for other people because I do, like I said, I do a lot of advocacy, and it's just part of who I am now. And it's sometimes blurry if I'm there for other folks or if they're there for me. But one of the things that switched for me, those groups came through COVID, and they were online connections. And most recently, I've been trying to do more
in-person
connections and in more relationships where I can connect with people more than just through Zoom, because that's part of who I am now. I never knew that about myself. I feel like I was an introvert for so long, but now I like people around me and prefer the in-person contact. So that's what I'm trying to do. But that's harder. That's sometimes harder to find those folks,
Well, and we were talking about this briefly the other day, and I think another 10 minutes or so, but thank you again for sharing all of this. So now you're in this process of kind of building a new life, composing a new life, building on what you've had. And can we talk a little bit about the kind of relationship you'd like to find, and with what kind of person, if that's not too personal a question to ask?
It's not. I think it doesn't get talked about enough sometimes. I don't know. I have these things that I say among friends and someone that I was really close to that was also there when I first came out and going through something very similar that I was going through with family and separation, but still loving their partner very much. And we were attracted to each other. And, we're both trans women, both at the same stage in our transition. And we both like dating men too. And I sometimes try it all because I don't know what's ever going to replace my partner. I don't know who's going to replace my wife. And I do know that I'm relationship oriented, but one of the things I'm trying to tell myself, because I hadn't been alone since first day in college, basically, to when I came out in 2020, I did meet a good friend who I think showed me what it meant to be happy in trans. And I don't know, really, I try to unpack that today because we're not that close now. And I try to understand if I was just sort of looking at her life and thinking that those things would make me happy. And in reality, I'm still trying to figure out what makes me happy. That's why I go to some of the community events, particularly around Pride or, when there's ways to meet people, because I really don't know who that person. Sometimes I struggle with who would want me as their other for the rest of their life. I don't know. I really don't know. It feels so confusing, and issues around bottom surgery from being really open, complicate the situation because sometimes there's a dynamic there that you're trying to figure out, and I'm just trying to right now. I'm trying to find nice people who enjoy my company, and I am dating somebody right now that it's hard for me to believe, but just sees through all the pronouns, but it's really hard for me to believe sometimes. But in any case,
that you're lovable.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that was so great about my last relationship is, like I said, it was based on friendship. And now, in my early 50s, trying to start a relationship, sometimes it doesn't always start that way. And it would be nice if it did. But so I'm a little bit guarded. I'm a little bit setting the bar really high.
And self-protecting. Yeah.
Yeah. But what I'm trying to do in all of this is, I guess, learn to be by myself for a little while so that I'm not just with someone who I'm with someone for the right reasons.
Yeah.
And lasting reasons if it ever happens again. And I don't know, everything just feels lonely because I'm in this sort of mourning period with losing or not being close to my family. Maybe that's what's going on. And if I fill my life with work or other friends, maybe I won't need a relationship, but that remains to be seen. I haven't figured that out yet.
So as we talk about this, I appreciate the honesty, the authenticity, and the texture of everything you're describing. And as you say, I don't think this aspect of being trans gets talked about enough, to your point. And I'm reminded, as you were talking, of the Walt Whitman line, I think in Leaves of Grass, where he says, "I am large, I contain multitudes." And my sense is that you're going through this period of exploration, self-discovery, discovering what connects you to other people and what you find attractive in others in various ways. Well, just a few more questions, if I may. I just want to pivot for a couple of minutes to talk about your work life, because it's clearly right now a support pillar for you. You're an architect. You're a successful architect with a major Boston architectural firm. Can you talk a little bit about your work and how you are bringing yourself as a trans person to that work, and how, in fact, if it's the case that community at work is a community of support for you?
Yeah, they definitely are. I think I didn't always envision myself working in the city, and I don't know why. I think I liked doing residential architecture. I liked being in the suburbs. I liked my quaint little life on the Cape, and I thought that was going to be my future. And I actually applied for most jobs on the Cape, and I did quite well in the interviews, but never being offered a job. And I found Moody Nolan, and they are an inclusive, diverse company, largest Black-owned architecture company in the U.S. And they took a chance on me. And I actually, in some ways, thought I was getting hired for a project architect role, but I ended up getting hired for a project manager role. And in that role, you get to manage a lot of people. And the way because I was practicing what I say is unencumbered and authentically for the first time in my life, I really took a lot in a short period of time. And I really embraced project relationships and team relationships and building teams. And I didn't really know that's something I would enjoy, coming from just managing, single family homes and small commercial projects, to managing large teams in multiple locations, to having a responsibility at a different level that I just didn't even know that I was capable of. But I'm also one of those folks that, someone took a chance on me, and I worked really hard, and I set out knowing the space that I have in my life because of the challenges with my family, that the things that used to fill those time slots or those voids, or, running errands on weekends or doing something, getting home for a game or whatever, like those things aren't there. So I knew I was going to throw myself at my work for medicinal reasons, therapeutic reasons, and see what I can do. I also realized that I was so distracted for so long prior to coming out that I wasn't working at my full potential, which was so hard on my family. I just want to give back. So I take every opportunity, and I didn't say no to anything. And I was recently promoted to an associate status, and I'm very proud of that because I've connected with more people in our 12 different locations from East Coast to Midwest and, down the East Coast, all the way down the East Coast, in a way that I've met folks from all different parts of the country with all different backgrounds, and people know me. And I like that. And I like what they see as this intelligent architect, project manager, leader, trans woman. And I say that last intentionally because I have to remind myself that I'm doing well because I deserve to be there in my merit. But that actually took me a little while because at first I thought I was sort of getting hired for my unicorn status I like to joke about. And that's not fair to them. It's really not fair to them because having been there long enough, I know that that's just not the case. But I didn't believe in myself the way that I think they did, at least my boss in Boston did. And so I'm really grateful. So I try not to waste those opportunities, and I try to grow in the company, and I try to steer them as much as I can when it comes to empathy with trans community without necessarily trying to change everybody's values. Because again, we have a lot of our companies based in the Midwest, and I'm very conscious of everyone's faith-based background or maybe conservative background, yet they're still welcoming me as a team member and allowing me to do my job and being respectful to me. And I feel like if this company can do that with offices in all different parts of the country, and I can contribute and be seen for my merit and what I bring to the table, and I'm needed, I feel like states can do the same thing, and people can do the same thing. And so I feel like I have a platform, and just like I didn't choose to be trans, I didn't choose my vocation in life in some ways. I've always known architecture, but I didn't know why I was so connected to affordable housing and providing housing. But it's because I always had that image of that secular little family. And I want that to, I want everybody to have access to that. So right now I'm trying to bring my advocacy work with the trans community and housing together more intentionally, so that providing equity and opportunities for trans folks in the housing market. So, yeah, and I hope to do more. I'm just getting started, though.
Well, Mara, I thank you for sharing so much with me today. Is there anything I have not asked you about that has kind of bubbled up as we've been talking that you'd like to talk about as we wrap up here?
No, I think we've touched on it all. I guess I'd want people to know that there's usually a lot more to the story. There's usually a lot more than what they see on the surface. And it took me a long time to be able to come to terms with this, even though I've known for my entire life. And even though I'm proud of my decisions and to come out publicly and transition socially, it doesn't make it any easier with the loss that people around me experience, and trying to recreate those things out of necessity, because I have to go on as hard as it is, because I just want the opportunity to be there in the future for my kids and my wife if she needs me. So that's been a big focus of my life right now.
Yeah. Well, Mara Betti, I want to thank you for sharing so much of yourself with me today. I think this story is so rich in its texture and depth. I think it will be of great value to our podcast listeners. So thank you so much again for doing this interview with me today.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's interview. Founded in 1973, PFLAG is the first and largest organization for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer people and their parents, families, friends, and allies. We have over 400 chapters and more than 200,000 members and supporters nationwide. Our members come from every generation and live in cities, small towns, and rural areas across the United States. PFLAG is committed to creating a world where diversity is celebrated and all people are respected, valued, and affirmed. For more information about PFLAG, explore the rest of this website or visit PFLAG National at pflag.org.